Hey guys, welcome to a bagpipe review of chapters 33 through 35 from the American Pageant. This is a recap of some of the major themes and events from these chapters, which focused on the New Deal and World War II. So let's get going. And of course, first comes B for belief systems. So what we see during this time period is a battle, a constant argument between limited government versus an expanding government. Limited government is the idea that the national government should remain small and that state and local governments should take priority, versus expanding government, where the national government, the federal government, government based here in DC, gets more power. And the New Deal is going to expand the broad powers of the federal government. We're also going to see challenges to the ideas of democracy and capitalism, like in the United States and also places like England, versus fascism, like we see in Nazi Germany and in Italy, communism, like we see in the USSR, and totalitarianism, which we also see in Japan, we see in Nazi Germany, we see in the Soviet Union as well. You're also going to see a lot of changes in art and literature. The use of the arts is going to be encouraged by the government as part of the New Deal. They're going to employ artists, composers, musicians, and things like that. And you're also going to see a lot of it in World War II propaganda, like this poster that's right here, which proposes or encourages people to support the Works Progress Administration. Let's look at the next letter, A, America in the world. So, America, while the New Deal is going on, isolates itself economically. An example of that was their avoidance of the London Economic Conference. But at the same time, they are trying to be more involved in the world's economy, mainly by lowering tariffs. The United States also changes its view towards Latin America by instituting the good neighbor policy, by encouraging peaceful trade and trying to withdraw some of the troops in the military action that had been taking place in Latin America over the previous decades. The United States also recognized the Soviet Union, and this would be invaluable as we became allies with them during World War II. This created new trade markets and new resources for the United States. But in the build-up to World War II, the United States did remain neutral and issued several neutrality proclamations, but they transitioned from remaining neutral to becoming the arsenal of democracy, providing weapons and money for countries like Britain as they fought against Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy. And they did this primarily through an act known as the Lend-Lease Bill. America obviously is going to play a big role in World War II in Europe and well, basically it's a world war, so everywhere in the world. And part of this is through planning for a post-war world before we were even involved in the war. This was through the Atlantic Charter that we had with Great Britain planning for a post-war Europe, as well as the Yalta and Potsdam conferences that are planning a post-war Europe and Japan, and how the United States, the Soviet Union, and Britain were going to maintain world order. And then, of course, the introduction of the ushering in of the atomic age, the use of the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a photo of the mushroom cloud of which is on the right. The introduction of the atomic age by the United States is radically going to change the history, not just of our country, but of the whole world moving forward. Now, geography and the environment definitely had some very interesting things going on during this time. Primarily, you had the Dust Bowl in the middle United States, in the Great Plains areas, all the way from Texas, Colorado, up north to the Dakotas, all the way to the Mississippi. And this even had some impacts on the East Coast and West Coast, as a lot of these farming areas dried up and literally the dust was swept up and blown all over the world. And the New Deal is going to create programs to tackle this and other issues. Programs like the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, Works Progress Administration, the Tennessee Valley Authority. The Tennessee Valley Authority is actually still in existence, based in eastern Tennessee, and creating a system of dams to control water and provide energy to a lot of those areas. But they had a major impact on the environment. Now, politics and power is a big one. You've got the New Deal, which we mentioned already, is expanding government power, introducing a limited welfare state in the United States. President Franklin Roosevelt himself is a symbol of power. He was elected to 4 terms. He's the only president who has ever served more than 2 terms, and now can be, because the Constitution was changed to limit presidents to 2 terms. There's also going to be a battle between this idea of America first. Hey, Trump was not the first one to use that term. This idea of America first and isolationism, where the United States should focus on its own issues and withdraw from world issues, versus the United States' role as a global leader and being involved in global affairs. as had been advocated during the 1920s. There's also a lot of criticism of the New Deal. It may be easy to think that the New Deal is really popular and really successful, but there are a lot of critics of it during the time. And there were critics of Roosevelt too. Even though he was popular enough to be elected to 4 terms, he definitely tried to pull some stuff that people did not like. For instance, the Supreme Court packing plan is a great example of showing the limits of the powers of one branch of government, despite how popular they are. Well, let's take a look at identity. This is an era that has a lot of changes to who considers themselves American and how we identify ourselves as American. Women continue to grow in their influence. Eleanor Roosevelt, Frances Perkins, Mary McLeod Bethune are all prominent women during this age, symbolic of the rise of the status of women and their involvement in a lot of issues. And then you have symbolic women, like Rosie the Riveter, as featured in the poster on the right, women throwing their efforts into support for World War II. You also have the resurgence of nativism. Again, this idea of America first, and this is primarily white Americans keeping out immigrants. And there's a strong strain of anti-Semitism. The United States could have done a lot more early on to try and to stop the Holocaust, to be more involved in awareness of the Holocaust and these attacks against the Jewish populations in Europe. But we're hesitant to. In fact, we limited immigration of a lot of Jewish people to the United States because of this anti-Semitism that was present in our society. And then there was Executive Order 9066, which led to the internment of Japanese Americans, forced Japanese Americans on the West Coast into internment camps, as featured as those boys in one of those internment camps below. Now, internment camps are not the same thing as the concentration camps, like those that were established by the Nazis in Europe. Nevertheless, these had devastating impacts on Americans. And we'll take a closer look at that in class. And there were no opportunities for Native Americans during this time. There was a program that was specifically provided for them, opportunities for them in the New Deal. And when it comes to civil rights for African Americans, you saw several important events in the march towards civil rights. The establishment of the Congress of Racial Equality, or CORE, was created, as well as the Fair Employment Practices Commission, a government agency that sought to promote equality in hiring as the United States was gearing up for and getting involved in World War II. In terms of peopling, in terms of migration and immigration, there was a lot going on during this time. There's the Bracero program, where the United States actually requested and encouraged Mexican labor to assist with farming in the Southwest. And millions of Americans are going to migrate to the cities to work in war industries. And the New Deal and military programs are also going to focus on southern states and towns and give them defense contracts to help them recover from the Great Depression and encourage more migration to those places. And finally, with the economy, with work, trade, and technology, a lot was going on. Obviously, hey, that New Deal introduced a limited welfare state where the government is going to be more involved in the economy, in regulating business, and in providing support for American citizens. They're focusing on the 3 R's: relief, reform, and recovery. Relief programs sought to immediately assist Americans. Reform sought to provide some immediate assistance, but basically change the way that American businesses and the American financial system was operating. And then recovery looked at long-term plans to try and prevent something like the Great Depression from occurring again. And one of these things that's going to be involved is an overhaul of the banking and finance industry that is radically going to change the United States and the way people save money, the way people spend money, and what people can do with their money. You see this today even when you walk into a bank. One thing that we still see today is Social Security, a poster for which is featured on the right hand. So Social Security is introduced during this time. It basically provides income for the elderly, for the disabled, for people who may have medical conditions that prevent them from working. And this is the first time we have a welfare program like this in the United States, a major overhaul. And then you have the Wagner Act, National Labor Relations Board, that establishes and officially recognizes trade unions and labor unions and the organization of workers, giving them a lot more power than they had had in the past. And this is the introduction of an economic practice or theory known as Keynesianism, named after John Maynard Keynes, a British economist who argued that when hard times or depressions are experienced, the government should spend to help the country recover from depression, and then once the country is recovered, can pull back the amount it's spending. Well, thanks for watching this brief review of Bagpipe of chapter 33 and 35.